Deputy High Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dames en heren, baie welkom. Middag, good afternoon, and it's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to address you this afternoon. I've decided to speak to you as a psychologist more than as the current Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Pretoria. And I want to ask you to think about the meaning of the word home. If you could think for a minute, perhaps close your eyes. What does it conjure up for you? What meanings? What images? Perhaps it also invokes certain tastes, smells, light and dark, sunshine. I'm sure if I had the opportunity to ask each and every one of you, what we would discover is that home has multiple meanings. And in fact, there have been quite a few studies done by psychologists exploring the concept of home and what it means to people. And what the research has found is that home is not merely about a physical place or a location such as a house or a flat. Rather, home is about the connection between the person and place. The meaning in home is a complex interaction between who we are as individuals, gives us a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and it's a connection to a place. It's not the place itself. So when, for example, I declare South Africa is my home, for me it's not just a physical space, it's part of who I am. If you didn't know me at all, you would recognize me as South African. It's in my accent, it's the way I speak, the words I choose, not just the accent. It's in my body language. And it is also in the way I see the world in general, the things I find funny or not funny. So home is really about that interconnection between who we are as people and place. One of the first studies done on the meaning of home, it was noted that if you speak to people at different phases of their lives, something interesting is found. The place we call home is not often linked to the time we spend in a particular place. So, for example, people can spend 10 or more years of their life in a particular place, and when you say home to them, that specific space does not immediately come to their mind. So, for example, many of you may have spent time in student residences or digs or communes, and some students spend as long as 7 years in those digs or communes. And yet, when those people are asked about home, the concept of the commune or digs or the student res never comes up. Instead, what all of us do when we say the word home is think back, and we think about the family home, the place where we grew up. Many years after we've moved out of that place, physically, for many of us, the psychological connection remains, and it remains till the day we die. That space where we grow up gives us a sense of rootedness, it gives us a sense of identity. So even when immigrants are studied, immigrants across the world, not only South Africans, who have been living in the adopted countries for several years, they still think about home as the place where they were born and the place where they grew up. Now, interestingly, the concept of nation, so on the one hand, home, linked very much psychologically to where we grew up, the place of our birth. On the other hand, the concept of nation, if you could just think about what it means to you. What does nation mean? From a psychological perspective, the connection between home and nation has been found to be extremely strong and powerful. The way we understand nation, our national identity, is very similar psychologically to how we relate to our families. And in fact, Freud and all psychoanalysts use a very complex term, a psychologically complex term called ambivalence to describe the way we feel about our families and also to describe the way we feel about our nations, no matter where we live in the world. And this concept of ambivalence is not always something that we experience at a conscious level, but it's a combination of love and hate, a complex combination of positive feelings and negative feelings. So just as when we think about our families, so I ask you, think about your families, your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers, the extended family, and I'm sure you will find many of them, or at times, even your mother and father, whom you may love so much, you find annoying, embarrassing, infuriating, so much so that at times you may have had the experience of wanting to leave home because the family was so annoying to you. And it's the same with nation. South Africa, too, is a country that is frustrating, it's infuriating, and sometimes invokes despair. But also, that concept of ambivalence, it's a place that I love. It invokes joy, a sense of possibility, and a sense of hope. It's a country of great contrasts, and I'm reminding you all the time about ambivalences. It's a country of great wealth. Earlier on, Professor Nick Bernadelle quoted somebody saying they found their roots, it's in Sandton, a place of great wealth. South Africa is also a place of great poverty. There's first-class infrastructure. At the same time, there's squatter camps, there's crime, but as a nation, and I currently live in Pretoria, we have the highest per capita number of church-going people in the world, in that area called Pretoria, Tshwane. So we're a country of contradictions and contrasts. There are areas of crime, as we all know, but then there's the sunshine, the wide open horizons, and those spectacular high-veld sunsets, or the sunset that you experience if you stand at Camps Bay. It's also a country full of surprises, where the unexpected has happened in the past and continues to happen and will happen in the future. Think back of South Africa in the mid-1980s. I was a teenager at that point. Not quite, I'm exaggerating. There was a state of emergency, widespread protests, no freedom of speech, international sanctions, and spiraling inflation. Everyone talked about the possibility of a civil war with bloodshed and scenes that we didn't want to imagine. Yet, less than a decade later, there was a negotiated settlement without the bloodshed and the war that many imagined. That's what we're capable of. In 1994, for those of us who were there, let's think back. We were thinking about the first democratic elections. There were adverts in the newspapers by our famous supermarkets, Pick n Pay, ShopRite, Checkers. Stock up. And many of us did. We stocked our grocery cupboards, tuna, baked beans, candles. Yet look what happened. We had a lot of stuff to eat afterwards that we didn't really want to eat. Then, 1995, years of sporting isolation. We had the audacity to say we will host the Rugby World Cup. Not only did we host it successfully, we were audacious enough to win it. Now we're counting down the days, and we are in South Africa each day. If you turn on the radio station, they tell you how many days are left to hosting the FIFA Soccer World Cup. Again, there are dire warnings from some quarters, and I believe some of those you encounter here in the media,